Hello and welcome to my channel, I Win to Lose Gaming. Throughout my channel's history, I've generally focused on the newer 5-star characters, especially for DPS Showdowns. But now I am proud to announce my very first 4-star exclusive DPS Showdown. Our contestants today are going to be Ningguang, Razor, and Xinyan. But before that, let's hear a quick word from a very generous sponsor today, Raid Shadow Legends. Raid Shadow Legends has millions of players and dozens of tough bosses. Let's talk about one of the most challenging bosses, the Fire Knight, Fyro the Infamous. After committing regicide at a peace summit with the Frost King, the once proud knight of Volcar was bound by his own people to guard Volcar's treasures. Now I'll talk about how to take Volcar's treasures for yourself. Just keep on hitting him. The Fire Knight's shield makes him immune to debuffs and damage, so champions that can do multiple hits on each attack can start hurting him. Heroes like Arbiter, Apothecary, Rosin Scarhide, Allure, and Coldheart can all do tons of damage to the Fire Knight. And did you know, the fastest way to level up your champions is through farming the campaign. You can grind loads of EXP and silver all at the same time. With tons of quality of life features in Raid, you'll be able to farm tons of resources super efficiently. This month, Raid is jam-packed with events. They've got a bunch of brand new champions coming out, like the Hellborn Sprite, Siege Hulk, and a freaking Hippo Man. There's also a new Doom Tower rotation, with tons of new floors, tons of new bosses, and most importantly, tons of new loot. If you want to get a huge head start in Raid, all you have to do is hit the link in the description or scan the QR code right here. New players will get an epic hero, Chinoru, who is amazing in Doom Tower. 200,000 silver, 1 XP boost, 1 energy refill, and 1 ancient shard so you can summon an awesome champion as soon as you get in game. Just look at this cool champion you'll get all for free. You will find your rewards here in your inbox for the next 30 days only. Seriously guys, I wanted to thank all of you for your support, as well as Raid Shadow Legends for their generosity in sponsoring this video. Let's familiarize ourselves with our contestants. In the rich and famous corner, we have the residential rock thrower, Ningguang. Ningguang is salty that she got her Geovision because she was actually trying to sell it for some extra mora, but ended up resonating with it instead. Commonly heralded as the strongest 4-star DPS character, today we will see if she can live up to that expectation in a head-to-head DPS showdown. My Ningguang throughout this video is rocking a Refinement 5 Lost Prayer to the Sacred Winds, and the 2-piece Archaic Petra plus 2-piece Gladiators for artifacts. Unfortunately, my Archaic Petra pieces are pretty much doo-doo, but despite that, her damage potential is actually pretty rock solid at 73.66%. But next, there is a bit of controversy, in my opinion, due to her damage potential calculations, and that is the Geo Party Resonance. Throughout my past DPS showdowns, I've always used party resonances to normalize character stats for overworld performance. However, Geo Resonance buffs Ningguang to about 91% of her damage potential if you include the additional 20% resistance shred that it provides. However, if we end up normalizing it by removing the resistance shred, then she's at 78% of her damage potential. I decided that Geo Resonance is basically assumed to be used by any Geo DPS character, and thus ignoring the resistance shred from it and not treating it as an additional bonus helps even out the damage potential calculations. So as such, for most of this video, my Ningguang is around 78% of her damage potential. And next, in the lonely orphan corner, we have Razor. The good-natured young lad raised by wolves is known as one of the better 4-star DPS characters, clawing away at his opponents with vicious melee claymore attacks. My Razor is wielding a Refinement 5 Song of Broken Pines, and will be rocking a 4-piece Pale Flame set. With Pyro Resonance, Razor's damage potential is around 77.58%, which is remarkably close to Ningguang's 78% damage potential from earlier. There's something interesting I'd like to point out though, and that is despite the fact that my Pale Flame set is leagues better than my Archaic Petra pieces, the damage potentials are actually incredibly similar. This, my friends, is the power of the crit rate substat on Ningguang's Lost Prayer to the Sacred Wind. Anyway, I digress. Let's move on. And finally, in the most neglected corner, we have Xinyan. Instead of throwing rocks like Ningguang, Xinyan makes rock music for all her adoring fans. Xinyan is by far the most neglected character in Genshin Impact. having no role in the story and the least amount of trailers for any post-release character. But today, Xinyan will be going head-to-head with two of the most popular 4-star DPS characters. Now unfortunately for our neglected musician, Xinyan's scaling is split between defense and attack. Her shield and her charge attack rely on her defense, at least at Constellation 6, but the rest of her kit relies on attack. Through my personal testing, I think Xinyan does more damage overall if you scale her with attack percent. So we'll be going with an attack percent build. Also, Xinyan is able to Dragon Strike. Let's see if it's worth considering. Fortunately for me and the making of this video, it doesn't appear to be any better than Xinyan's regular spin to win playstyle. My Xinyan will be rocking a Refinement 5 Song of Broken Pines with the 2-piece Gladiators and 2-piece Pale Flame. I decided that this combination was better than the 4-piece Pale Flame, mostly because with her being built with attack percent, it's actually very difficult for Xinyan to keep her level 3 shield up for the Pale Flame procs. With 2 Pyro and 2 Geo, Xinyan is at 77.77% of her damage potential, very close to the aforementioned 78% targeted damage potential. In summary, all 3 of these characters are very similar in damage potential. All 3 of them have very well leveled talents, and all 3 of them are at Constellation 6. Before starting the showcases though, I always need to point out that any and all of these runs can be improved upon. These are just my best attempts within a reasonable amount of time for each of these characters and scenarios. Let's start off with everyone's #1 favorite volunteer, the Regisvines. Ah yes, the Cryo and Pyro Regisvines, our 2 little HP having but always willing volunteers. Ningguang's rapid burst damage was unsurprisingly able to quickly and effortlessly dispose of our poor plant friend. Now as for Razor, while using the Pale Flame set, he needs to first use an E, then burst, then E again. This actually wastes quite a bit of time on a low HP target like the Regisvine. But once he got his 2 stacks of Pale Flame up, our plant friend is no longer with us. Razor truly does hate his vegetables. And lastly, Xinyan's burst chunked a very large portion of Regisvine's HP. Then Xinyan turned herself into a salad spinner and thus turned our Regisvine friend into chopped salad. Overall, the Regisvine fight is a fight that favors quick burst damage, so characters with longer ramp-up times like Pale Flame Razor fall behind a bit here. This fight has been and will always be my favorite appetizer to the rest of the meal. Our next volunteer is the always belligerent 11th Fatui Harbinger, Tartaglia. Tartaglia is not having a good day here, first having countless rocks thrown at his face by a local businesswoman. Ningguang doesn't even pride herself on her combat capabilities, instead resorting to dropping palaces on her opponents. But despite that, Child was no match to a common Child strategy of throwing rocks during a fight. Thanks to the loading time between fights, Ningguang's screens are back and she is able to get her burst again to quickly dispose of third form Child. There's been a persistent theme of Child losing to children, and Razor happens to be a homeless child. Razor's burst lasts for quite a long time, and as such, he is able to effectively dispose of Child's Form 1 and Form 2 with a single burst. However, this puts him in an awkward scenario of not having his burst ready for third form Child. With a bit of time to get a couple extra E's, Razor got his burst again in order to quickly then dispose of third form Chao. Our third volunteer is the local fauna, Primo Geovisha. Interestingly, the Primo Geovishap resists both geo and physical damage equally, so in that sense, this fight is actually equal in that regard. However, this does boost the effects of geo resonance more than the other fights. Against an enemy with a larger HP pool, the times are much closer since Ningguang needs to rely on a much lower charge attack DPS to gap fill, in comparison to just relying on her high burst damage to immediately eliminate the target. Razor's relatively high sustained DPS helped him close the gap in this longer fight when compared to the previous fights. I'm honestly not entirely sure if my skill rotation is optimal here, but I tried to use his E as often as possible to both maintain 2 stacks of the Pale Flame set and to gain energy for his burst. Once his burst was over, it was all about trying to get as much energy as possible to refill his burst in order to finish off the Primo Geovishap. Lastly, we have Xinyan's performance. When it comes to rock versus rock, Xinyan's coveted strategy of spinning herself silly seems quite effective here. However, for longer sustained fights against enemies with larger HP pools, Xinyan actually runs out of stamina and needs to resort to her ersatz normal attacks. Regardless, this fight was still relatively effortless for a local rock star. And with a new boss comes another potential volunteer. Despite many of the previous additions, such as the angry giant rock frog and a literal ice cube not being the best of volunteers for DPS Showdown, the puppet samurai, Magu Kenki, is a great new addition. Magu Kenki is a unique addition, with the player being able to register hits as it shifts into its first and second phases. However, that unique mechanic doesn't really come into play for any of these 3 characters. Ningguang's burst is extremely reliable for disposing a single enemy at a time. Now, I realize that I should have used Ningguang's elemental skill near the end to speed this up a bit, but oh well. After watching this Razor fight, I ended up debating with myself as to whether or not I should actually use Razor's burst for the first form of Magu Kenki, but it didn't take that long for Razor to get his burst up again in order for him to quickly knock out the second form of Magu Kenki. And again, Xinyan can reliably spin away her competition as usual. I'm not sure if conserving her burst here was the right thing to do, but alas, it is what I did, and this was the best run out of the multiple Xinyan runs that I did. As future videos continue to include this Magu Kenki fight, I will be able to improve on various strategies against it. So in summary, we have these respectable times for their overworld performances. When focused almost entirely on these individual characters' damage outputs, they are all able to comfortably dumpster the overworld content. Ningguang definitely has an advantage though, thanks to the somewhat low HP pools of overworld monsters and her quick burst damage output. Although Razor and Xinyan are surprisingly close to each other, I like to point out that this whole showcase was done without super conduct, of which Razor has a huge advantage, only needing a single cryo teammate to apply super conduct in comparison to Xinyan. However, I did want to put these performances into perspective. If you've seen my previous DPS showdown between Ganyu, Eula, and Hu Tao, you'll have an inkling of how well those 5-star characters did. While these performances with these 4-star characters are very respectable, compared to a 5-star character at max potential like Eula, these 4 stars are unfortunately very far behind. But on the flip side, fortunately no content in this game is so incredibly difficult that it can't be completed by 4-star DPS characters like Ningguang, Razor, or even Xinyan. And now finally, we will be seeing how these 4-star characters perform in Abyss 12. For this showcase, it's not entirely an Abyss 12 gauntlet. For the interest of time, I started each floor with full energy. Besides, this is a very pragmatic way for any player to 9-star Abyss 12. Also, I did not pick any damage boosting cards throughout these runs. I'm also using the same Venti and Zhongli builds across all 3 parties. Venti has the Elegy for the End with the Viridescent Veneer 4-piece, and Zhongli has the 4-piece Tenacity of the Millilith with the Favonius Lance. Now, the flex support slot differs between the 3 characters. Ningguang can make use of my Constellation 6 Bennett, but unfortunately for the other 2 characters, Constellation 6 Bennett ruins Razor's build and Xinyan's build. Instead, Razor will run with Rosaria, who unfortunately isn't at Constellation 6 yet. As for Xinyan, I decided to try something a little bit different, by using Eula as a support character. Eula's Hold E has very low cooldown and also reduces physical resistance by a pretty substantial 25%. However, I do think Xinyan will do much better with burst damage Mona as support, but I figured if I used burst damage Mona, that would be more of a Mona showcase than a Xinyan showcase. Anyway, let's finally move on to the Abyss 12 DPS showdown. In the end, all 3 characters were effortlessly able to 9-star Abyss 12. The interesting thing about this new Abyss is that the supports are honestly the most important factor in it. And really, the DPS character in these situations was very replaceable. And let's definitely talk about Anemo characters right now. 12-2 without Venti is basically light and day. Without Venti to group up these treasure hoarders, Abyss 12-2 takes so much more time. As for 12-3, Anemo characters and swirling Pyro onto the Abyss Lector is absolutely crucial to clear this quickly. Since a huge amount of time of these runs was actually taken up by support abilities, the actual DPS windows are much smaller, and so is the variance in time between these runs. Despite all this, Ningguang's higher damage output did have a tangible gain in the time saved, especially for 12-3, where she was able to knock the Abyss Lectors out much faster than the other 2. So there you go, my first DPS showdown between 3 4-star characters. Now, I didn't mean to neglect 4-star characters all this time on my channel. It's just that I've finally gotten around to building them. With the extra resources I've accumulated over the months, I've finally been able to allocate some of them to not just maxing out the new 5-stars that appear. How do you think these 3 4-star characters perform? I regularly make Genshin Impact content like this, ranging from C0 character showcases, guide videos, DPS showdowns, and more. So be sure to smash that subscribe button, as it's the easiest and best way to support my channel. Thanks for watching, and thank you, Raid Shadow Legends, for sponsoring this video. As always, I appreciate every single one of you. This is I Win to Lose, signing out.